I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
67 at O'Hare, 70 along the lakefront. Your next news update is at 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Experience the many restaurants of Seven Bridges on the evening of August 8th at the Golf Club in Woodridge, Illinois. Aside from great tastings and treats, Sample Seven Bridges will have prize drawings and DJ entertainment throughout the evening. Visit chambers630.com to register.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy this morning, Chicago Tribune editorial boardist Kristen McQuarrie. Kristen, Trump condemns white supremacy but doesn't propose gun laws after shootings. That was the New York Times headline covering the remarks that he gave yesterday morning.
The second headline or the first headline?
The first headline.
Oh, they changed it, I think. I think they got some pushback to the original one. It wasn't tough enough or something.
No, they got pushback to the Trump unite versus racism.
Okay, right.
They didn't like that because that was accurate in terms of the message of his speech, and it didn't say that Trump is a racist in 42-point sans serif. And so
that's what I.
Or is it Garamond? I don't know what they use. But anyway,
I think New Times Roman.
That would make sense, I suppose. Yeah, so that wasn't good enough. You know, it seems to me that the combination of the D.C. press corps coverage, and we heard it in the debates last week, Don Lemon, Lemon, asking the question, with respect to Trump's racist tweets, blah, 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 blah. You know, you start from the premise that he's racist.
Oh, I think the question was even worse than that. It was, you know, how do you justify or what do you say to voters who excuse his racism for the economy or bigotry?
Yeah, well, that was another question, right?
Okay.
Too.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yes. So we right? How can you suspend consideration of his racism because the economy is good and so on and so forth?
And this is a straight up, you know, this is supposed to be a straight up debate.
Of course it is. It's CNN.
I know.
I mean,
no loaded questions. It's just we just want to get them on their positions and be fair about it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I will say this. Don Lemon makes up for his agenda with very thoughtful questions.
After tequila or before?
I'm kidding, of course. Yeah, I know that was a couple of New Year's Eves ago where he was ready to love again.
I should just let it go.
Yeah. And I tell you, speaking of old has-beens like the old media, the CNN apparatchiks, the Rachel Maddows of the world. I'm not paying attention. Have you seen the new Madonna video?
No. Why would I?
So this little old lady is desperate to stay relevant, so she's trying to get into the gun control debate. God Control is the name of her new song.
Oh, interesting.
And her video features a nightclub shooting. And I mean a nightclub shooting, like it's, Martin Scorsese quality. She's so old she can only mumble now. She can't enunciate.
What can we do? Get the kids ready, take them to school. Everybody knows they don't have a chance to get a decent job, to have a normal life. When I talk reforms, it makes me laugh. They pretend to help, it makes me laugh. I think I understand why people get a gun. I think I understand why we all give up. Every day they have a kind of victory. Blood of innocence spread everywhere. They say that we need love, but we need more than this.
what's happening.
We lost God control.
She's typing in her
She's typing. Then there's the coffins of children at a church.
dead bodies on the ground.
Yes, I'm going to make you listen to all of it, just in case you were wondering. And that's the graphic nightclub shooting to kick it off. So you have that to look forward to, her relevance, this all being translated into art in addition to fundraising missives from Democrats. That's how the shooting is being received by the cultural elites on the left. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by a cultural elite on the center right. He is Chadwick Moore, former editor at large of Out Magazine and The Advocate, contributor to Playboy, New York Post, the New York Times. Chadwick, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. Great to be here.
Morning. What do you think of that new Madonna song, that new Madonna offering?
Wow. Well, I think Sia did the nightclub shooting music video first after Pulse, so it's nice to see Madonna once again being totally culturally irrelevant and picking up the caboose from other people. It sounds horrifying. I haven't seen the music video yet, but just listening to that, my God.
Yeah.
But this is also the woman who threatened to blow up the White House. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's her. Yeah, I think that was at the kickoff P-Hat rally, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
The reaction to just your kind of general comments on the reaction from Dem politicians, the D.C. press corps coverage of both the actual horrors that occurred in Dayton and El Paso, in addition to Trump's reaction to them.
You'd mentioned it just at the top of the hour. The first thing I saw this morning, I was astounded to see the New York Times change their headline, as you mentioned. That's incredible. After a Twitter backlash, and I saw hashtag cancel NYT was trending on Twitter because liberals were so upset that the Times admitted Trump called for unity and an end to racism. Personally, I think that he's of course right to denounce everything. He has multiple times denounced this white supremacy nonsense that he's so often affiliated with, and it's gotten to a point where they just back him into this corner. They just want this narrative. They want this to be associated with him. Meanwhile, the shooter in Dayton, Ohio, was a Elizabeth Warren supporter and followed all of these left-wing journalists, and a lot of them were scrambling yesterday to delete tweets that he had retweeted, and we don't hear anything about that. But of course, at this point, why should we be surprised? And here we are, back to where we are so often with the same narrative about gun control and these ridiculous statistics that they pull out of nowhere, saying things like the United States has had 294 mass shootings this year. Well, that depends on how they're defining mass shootings, and basically 290 of those were gang-related, inner city,
right,
existing in places where there aren't any guns, where they have extremely strict gun control laws.
Like Chicago.
Right, and also
like Chicago. I didn't want to say it, but yeah.
Yeah, and also mass shootings like happened this weekend in Chicago with 55 shot, 7 dead, that are not covered because there's no there's no political value in covering them.
Yes, and one happened in Brooklyn this weekend, where I live, at a funeral in Brooklyn. Same thing. It was 4 people were shot, but you won't hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, it did. I'm coming from the Chicago Tribune, so we did, of course, our news side did report on it. But then when when the mayor had a chance to talk about it here, our new mayor, the headlines were all about her response to Donald Trump when we are sitting on 55 people shot over a weekend in our city. And people don't want to call that, domestic terrorism. I don't know. Maybe I'm overusing that word or exaggerating it. Am I?
That terrorism is such a, how do we even define that? And I'm even, the definition being violence to achieve political ends. I'm even tepid to call both of the shootings, one left wing and one right wing, that happened this weekend. The shootings everyone's focusing on. I'm even I don't even want to call those terrorism. I think it gives the shooters too much credit. And because if you look at what happens with these kids who are doing this, they're always kids. They're always some idiot. They're lonely. Maybe they just want to thrill, as sick as that sounds. And we see the media constantly building these people up into some kind of monsters, saying, that whenever there's a manifesto or video, they say, the chilling last words of a mass murder. And why do we even turn them into these almost Hollywood level creatures when we should be ridiculing them and making fun of them? Otherwise, we're just encouraging more behavior like this from really mentally unstable people.
In his remarks yesterday, Trump talked about the need for a cultural change, and that's difficult. It doesn't give you the immediate satisfaction that we demand, like some sort of legislative initiative, no matter how irrelevant. And Rusty Reno talked a little bit about culture in his piece. And first things, I want to get your reaction. You're mentioning some of this too, and some of what we talked about last week with respect to the Gilroy Garlic Festival shooting, where the shooter allegedly responded to a witness asking him why he's doing this, because I'm really angry. And the idea that we indulge the unrestrained sentimentalism of young people and everybody alike, certainly the left would, this sort of sentimental barbarism, unrestrained emotion. My morality comes from my emotion. Whatever I feel, I can express in the most ridiculous and even destructive and perhaps deadly ways. Rusty Reno talks about where our culture is. Out of wedlock births have risen over the last generation. More young people growing up in unstable family situations, as was the case with the El Paso shooter. We've talked quite a bit over the last year about the declining life expectancy among certain demographics, which is sort of a remarkable phenomenon in a country as wealthy as America. And he writes, a fish rots from the head down. The social dissolution of our nation is a direct consequence of the mentalities, policies, and actions of our ruling class. It's damning that tech moguls take extreme measures to insulate their own children from the devices and social media platforms they market so vigorously to the rest of us. It's damning that our ruling class makes a fortune on violent video games, does nothing to limit pornography, and presses for drug legalization amid an epidemic of overdose death. Now, I'm not going to connect any of those things to shootings generally or these shootings specifically, but what about the sort of the libertinism of the ruling class and sort of the hypocrisies that Rusty Reno points out?
I think he's very right. Both of you are right to point those out. And when President Trump was discussing a change in culture, I believe that's what he's referring to. And I think mainly what a huge part of it is fatherlessness. And you see that both. This is something I'm writing about at the moment. You see that with both these children, these young men who El Paso and Ohio, and you see it in Chicago. You see it with inner city gun crime, and you see it with these people who make the headline to go into public spaces and shoot indiscriminately. One of the things they both have in common is fatherlessness, and that is a plague in our culture. And there's a lot of people who blame that on many things, and a lot of people on the right talk about sort of the culture of academia and feminism, and I'm not talking about good feminism, but this kind of wacky, man-hating, fourth-wave feminism that just tells men that they're worthless, that they're not needed. When men grow up in a society that we're biologically programmed to provide and to be needed, and when you grow up in a society that is increasingly tells you you're not, we don't need you, that you're sort of worthless, it's going to do something to the youth, to the young men. And when they don't have strong father figures around, so many broken homes and divorces, it's no wonder that we see this level of disillusionment and anger and reaction. Now, I'm in no way, excusing these people's behavior, obviously, but it's always something that's missing from the debate, because the Democrats jump immediately to seizing guns and chipping away at the Second Amendment, and the Republicans jump immediately on well, here's what happened in Chicago this weekend, and mental health.
Yeah.
But I think we're ignoring this much larger phenomenon. And there was just like in my parents' generation, there were gun clubs in public schools. There were shooting clubs. Can you imagine something like that today? It all changed very quickly.
I wonder what you think when you watch the Democratic presidential debates as you sort of overlay this philosophy of men and feminism and just in particular, the white men who are running for president and just how they are falling over themselves to be the least racist and the most in touch with their feminine side. And does that cross your mind while you're watching these debates?
Oh, of course. It's so embarrassing to watch. And
I can't hardly watch them. I think it's so embarrassing too.
Oh, I know, and I mean the most cringe. I mean they're all cringe, but look at there was a wonderful video of Kristen Gillibrand.
Oh yeah, that's the one.
Who's in Ohio, yeah, grandstanding about white supremacy to these sort of working class
Youngstown
Ohioans.
Yeah,
who were just looking at her like, huh? I'm just trying to put food on my table.
Yeah,
Bill
right.
de Blasio did the same thing in Iowa. This is the consequence of the left, which has jumped on into full-on socialism. I think it's safe to say, whether or not that's how they would rule, that's what they're pandering to. After the fall of the Soviet Empire, they had to abandon economic Marxism because everyone knew it didn't work, and they replaced it with this race gender thing that we have now, and they just continue to harp on that in the same way so that the sort of like straight white male and the sort of the has become the new proxy for the old economic oppressors, the old bourgeois. And it's hilarious to watch any of these straight white men or gay white men in Mayor Pete's case running, and they have to constantly chide themselves about how they have to check their privilege. Well, just step aside and let a black person run.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bow out, Kristen Gillibrand. You lead by example. Be the change you wish to see. The Kristen Gillibrand in Youngstown, Ohio, you're talking to Laverne and Shirley about white privilege was just, I mean, that is priceless.
Was it? I haven't seen it. But my favorite moment was during Gay Pride Month when they were all trying to be, the most open, and she was at a bar and they just have her like dancing behind the bar. And she's pouring drinks and she does like this weird cheers thing and she's like, gay rights or something. It was hard to watch.
It's so authentic. It's just too authentic. That's why.
That's why.
Yeah, it's over the top authenticity. Speaking of that, Chadwick, you had this tweet, and I'm not going to steal your line, but I loved it. Kathy Zhu, who we had on the show, she's the Michigan beauty queen who was de-queened for basically being a Trump supporter and tweeting out some relatively pedestrian things about violence in the inner cities and so forth. She tweeted out, for anyone who doesn't believe being gay is more socially accepted than being conservative, go to a public place and shout, I just came out as gay, or I am now a Trump supporter, and see the responses you receive. And you responded to that, and I just wanted to have you memorialize your response for our listeners.
I don't have immediately in front of me my exact words, but I said she's absolutely right. I'm a gay man, and I came out not far from Chicago, in downstate Illinois, and fairly conservative community. This was in the early 2000s, and no problem at all. No problem. In fact, I was celebrated. And here in 2017, I came out as a conservative in New York City, and I was fired from my job. I lost all my friends. Continued to get kicked out of the gay bars.
It's not funny, but I mean,
it's like being a conservative today is like being gay in the 1950s. It's like you'll get your name printed in the paper. They won't hire you.
You're talking to Dan and Kristen who live in Chicago. We have no friends either, so we should start like
but for different reasons. My personality has a lot to do with it,
That's true.
Too. But Chet, you said this was a tweet from last week. You said just 2 days ago I was asked to leave a Brooklyn gay bar again. What happened there?
Oh my God! So it's this place that I know everyone who works there. Ironically, the one black person who works there is the one who still tries to get my pants whenever I see him on the street. But all the triggered white liberals is how it always goes.
Are you wearing like a MAGA hat?
No.
Okay.
They just
that would be gauche.
Well, the thing is, I would say this. Well, the difference between Manhattan and Brooklyn gay community is the ones in Brooklyn are all they're all bloggers and stuff, so they all follow the media, so they all know who I am. In Manhattan, they don't care because they're just gay and partying, So I'm walking home, and I live down the street from this gay bar, and there's this there's two door people there who I'm sure are Republicans, because whenever I walk by, they like smile and say hi, and they know, So I stop, and one of them, I think he's an ex-cop, and I was just talking to him, and I've known him for years, and he was like, "Oh, are you going in tonight?" I said, "No, I can't go in there anymore. They won't serve me." He's like, "No, just go ahead, try." So I'm like, "All right, I'll try." So I go in, I order a beer, and I go out in the little patio, and the bartender comes out and says, Chadwick, I mean, I personally don't have a problem, but I'm not sure what I'm not sure what our policy is about you being here, and I think you might start to make people uncomfortable. I'm looking around, nobody notices me, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, should I leave? He said, well, I mean, I think maybe that's probably best. I mean,
oh my gosh, you have to wear the hat, even if you're not even a Trumpster. Just wear the hat, go get it on video.
No, you know what you need to do?
Oh, yeah.
You need to get Sarah Sanders and Ted Cruz and his wife together, and you guys all go out to dinner together.
Oh my gosh.
Because you're all thrown out of everywhere you go, apparently.
Well, it's happened to me at years ago. I was with Milo Yiannopoulos. I was sitting down interviewing him when we went somewhere and this is on video. We happened to walk into middle of the afternoon a meeting of the Democratic Socialists of America.
Oh, no.
We just happened to